Hey guys, welcome back to the Paladin's Alliance. I'm sorry for not uploading content. I'm on a little bit of a hiatus trying to finish up my degree, but we'll be back on the content grind, starting with this Challengers Pick'ems. I mean, it's that time of the year again. I'm so excited to be back into this little cycle, and after the stickers released, of course, those stickers look incredible, and seeing the players' reaction, seeing the creativity on display has been honestly super exciting. But let's get into it. I mean, this is why you're here. Let's get into my pick'ems. We're gonna aim for that diamond. Of course, it's going to be very difficult, maybe even more hard than the Antwerp cycle, but we'll try it for it anyways. And we'll start with my most likely picks to my least likely picks that I'm gonna try to confirm those 5 points, and then I'll go through the 3-0 and the 0-3 category as soon as I finish these up. But I'll start with G2. I think this is the most straightforward one of all the picks here. You know why, I know why. Nico, Monacy, Hunter, JKS, Hooksy, all of these 5 players have been committed to absolutely smashing their roles. And, with how deep their map pool is, with how resilient that they seemingly are now after that RMR cycle scare in the last major cycle, I think this team is well on their way to qualify for the next stage, and then also impressed to potentially take the trophy. Of course, one of the front runners. And with that, of course, FaZe is also one of those teams to be in that front running conversation. Even though they are the very last seed to just scrape their way into this part of the stage, it doesn't matter in my opinion. It doesn't matter because this roster is still pedigreed and is still a very viable team to win the whole thing altogether. You've got some of these players that are very, very clutch. You look at Kerrigan, you look at some of the late round calls that he makes, it's still clutch. You look at Brokey, you look at Twist, they still can put up some huge clutches of their own. Rops as well, and Range shows up when the majors count, when those big tournaments start, he actually shows up. So regardless of the tough matchups that they have, I think this team will scrape through and make it to the next stage, and I think they'll make it to the playoffs as well, but we'll get there when we get there. But after this, I mean, this is where, things start to get a little tough. I mean, I think the pick'ems start to get pretty open, and I'll start to go with how, dangerously flowy these pick'ems are. It's going to get tough, and I think the upsets are going to happen, but I'm going to start with Liquid, and I'm picking this team basically off of the caliber of squads that are within this challenger stage and where I know Liquid can comfortably be. We've seen the floor of this team, and we've seen the ceilings. We know that the floor is very, very low. You look at their RMR run, they couldn't get into that Legends berth. So at least fight for the Legend stage, they actually struggled to beat Nouns, another domestic rival of theirs. I mean, I honestly shouldn't even say rivals because I don't even think they're at the same level of that roster. But, still, they found their way through. They don't have the greatest seed from the Americas region. But on the same hand, we've seen the kind of highs that this team has had. Their deep Katowice run, beating the likes of FaZe, getting that 3rd to 4th place run, making the finals of the World Finals, also showing very impressive stuff there. But they've dropped best of 3 series to the likes of Pain multiple times at the likes of EPL. So overall, I'm still very keen on picking Liquid because there are some safe bets in terms of NAF, in terms of Yekindar, and Elige's uptick in form. But overall, you can see the caveats for them not making it through. The unreliable map pool. You see the up and down performances of the likes of OC, and you have the questionable individual performances of Nitro. But overall, I'm still going to put Liquid to go through. I still think they have enough firepower to consistently make it through, regardless of the fact that, they might not make the playoffs. We'll see when we get there. We'll see what Liquid we get throughout this challenger stage. But for right now, I think they're good enough to make it through. The next team I'm going to put through is ENCE. I think that ENCE was not on my radar in terms of the Valde roster that they had, but as soon as they brought in Nerds, this team has been completely revitalized, and I'm so happy for it because, ENCE was such a front runner for such a long time in the online period, coming out of the online period with Spinks, that it felt as though, ENCE could be one of those staple organizations, but they quickly fell by the wayside. Now that they have Nerds in, and they've kind of changed up their playstyle once more, you could kind of see Nerds as being let off the leash. He's having some incredible performances and beating the likes of G2 at EPL, so they have the capability of beating the very best. And, you know, Snappy is getting much more comfortable calling with this roster. You still have rocks in terms of Diha, in terms of Sunpice on that CT side. I think that this roster can get it done regardless of, you know, the less amount of time that they've had among each other. I still think that this guy Nertz has brought in, no pun intended, has brought in some huge firepower to this roster and some consistent firepower to this roster, no less. And I think this team is going to make some serious waves at this major. The next team that I'm going to put through is Force. Force sounds like kind of a curveball, but look, man, I think these CIS rosters can do some crazy work when the going gets tough, and I think this roster is no less. Overall, you look at Zorte and you look at the numbers that he was able to produce, and that alone makes me just so excited for the trajectory of this roster, having some absolutely bonkers statistics. And then you go down the row, Jerry has still been calling a very good style of CS. And then you look down at the row at the riflers of this roster. Shalfie has been playing very well. He always has been for this roster. And then you look at Resalt, the new boy on the block that's been molded by Jerry. Again, another rising talent in some more supportive elements, still putting up numbers. So overall, I think that Force should be able to make it through. You know, they've been playing so much CS as of recent that they've got the reps to come into this challenger stage up and running very quickly, get off to that 2-0 start, be very in your face in those best of ones, and I think that they'll be able to eventually get it over the line. Of course, the caveat for this roster is the mentality aspect of it, and always has been for Force rosters because of how young their rosters are. They sometimes can struggle to convert the qualifying best of 3, but I think they're taking a turn right now for the better. You've seen them do some really good stuff at EPL, and that alone instills me with some confidence. And then getting over the line in the RMR after that 2-0 start, I think they'll be able to get it done with the caliber of rosters that are here, and I'm going to say Force go through. Now, you know, it gets even harder because there's a lot of international rosters that are so in flux right now. You have NIP, you have OG, you have MOUZ, and you have Apex and Gamer Legion, honestly, that have these international rosters but are showing some really wonky results, all things said. I'm going to put through an NIP. I think I want to pick them as the one international representation of these 4 or 5 rosters. And that's just because of how much firepower that there is on this roster. And I think that they should be able to kind of stumble their way through regardless. You've got Config, obviously popping off as usual. You've got Rez, you've got Headtrick, and you've got Brolin. And all 4 of these players, in some time or the other, have shown that they can be star-studded players in their own right. And I still have that expectation that they can do that in this challenger stage. They've also had a lot of time to reintegrate Config. Keep in mind that Config hasn't been on this roster for too long, and frankly, there have been certain situations where he hasn't been able to, you know what positions to play, what certain positions are even called altogether. So honestly, with that time being spent, I think this NIP roster is going to come in re-energized. They're going to have a much more deeper map pool at this point. They're going to have their protocol set in place. Alexi B is going to have time with the boys to basically figure out what to do with all this firepower and figure out proper positioning for all of these players. And I think it's going to work. I think they're going to be able to eke their way through this challenger stage. And that's why I'm going to pick them out of all of the other teams in that kind of international so-so bracket to make it through. I'm not going to have OG make it through, even though they've been able to show that they can go toe-to-toe with Nico as the IGL. I just don't think that he's cut well enough to do it. And overall, beyond Dexter, I don't think there's a guaranteed win condition for them to consistently win games. You look at Flames, you look at Neofrag, and you look at Fiku, and I'm not necessarily instilled with confidence. In fact, it's actually been Nico who individually has been stepping up recently, and personally, I just don't think that he's individually up to snuff to consistently keep up that form regularly. And we saw, I'm not going to take Brazy Party's results at face value too much, but there were a lot of situations in that final game against C9 that I think that they should have converted, and I think mentally they might be a little checked out here to try and convert and qualify for the Legend stage, so I'm not going to have them go through. I'm not gonna have Gamer. It's actually, I'll come back to Gamer Legion. But I don't have Apex going through. I think Kixan is a pretty good IGL, and he solved a lot of their issues after Stiko kind of ran the team into the ground in that sense. I love the attempt from him, but it wasn't the right decision overall in the long term. But they've got a lot of players that can go toe to toe with the upper levels of Counter Strike. You've got JL, you've got Knock, and both of these players have shown that they can compete at the very upper end of CS. But I don't think Kixan is an experienced enough IGL to play at this level of the game. I think he needs a little bit more time, and maybe next cycle in CS2 he's got it. He's got what it takes. But until then, I think this Apex team still has to keep gestating, and we'll be back to talk about them in a higher aura when the challenger stage, or sorry, when we get to that PGL major in Copenhagen. I'm not gonna have Monty go through. I'm not really impressed by this roster at all. And sure, they broke through the RMR stage. Yes, they have one of the highest number of maps being played in the tier 2 space, but I think that they're a bit too one-dimensional for my liking. I think a lot of their good faith relies on Boros. And look, man, Boros is an absolute stud. But if he goes missing, or these top teams actually anti-strat for this roster, then their win conditions could very quickly fall by the wayside. SDY is not necessarily the heavy hitter that I'm expecting. Boro 2K went missing at the RMR stage, even with Boros on that roster. And I don't think that Crossnull is all that either. So I'm not necessarily all in on the Monty project. I'm not going to have them go through. And then as far as Mouse is concerned, look, their bombing out of Rio is a huge cause for concern. I do think that they will be able to bounce back from it, but I am still a little worried here, to say the least. I don't think that Torji is a good enough opper at this point, and sure, they have a simple enough style to replicate and go through, but I don't believe in Dexter anymore. And I don't feel like Xertion is enough of a win condition for this Mouse roster to bring in results. I'd love to be proven wrong, but for some reason, my gut is telling me that I don't necessarily believe in the Mouse project and that changes have to be made. So overall, I'm not going to go with Mouse. My last pick is going to be Pain. And this sounds a little appalling, right? Maybe I could have put in OG, maybe I could have put in Mouse, but why am I putting in Pain? I think right now, Pain are hitting some kind of a flow state as a roster. After they dropped PKL, I thought this roster was dead in the water, frankly, losing an IGL, and then not even actually stating to the public who their IGL was. And then after a little while, it was revealed that Big Zero is the IGL, and man, this guy can't make a bad call right now. I mean, some of the calls that he's been making have been absolutely unreal. He's been calling around himself a lot of the times, putting himself in a lot of these lurking positions, and he's been doing very well to convert it. And I think that this guy is an unreal talent for the Brazilian scene, and it's elevated a lot of fantastic players. I mean, Neck is having to just shoehorn himself into this roster at the very later stage after being benched early on, is still putting up multi-frags for this roster, showing that he still has what it takes to go toe-to-toe. And, of course, I can't talk about Pain without talking about Skulls and Zebi. Skulls is having a renaissance in his own right. Zebi is still showing that he is one of those pedigreed Brazilian oppers. And right now, I think that they've got a deep enough map pool to get it done. I really like Pain. I think they'll be able to eke it through. And I think that this team is a bit of a land team. And what I've seen from EPL, what I've seen from, hints of them at the Brazy party, I think that I'm going to go with Pain to be my last team to make it through. But the 3-0s, who do I put in here? I'm going to put in Gamer Legion. And the way I perceive the 3-0 column is always the team that has the potential to just go, flying through and defeating everybody and just going 3-0. Or just bombing out and not making it. I'm going to put in through Gamer Legion, and I think this is the one that I had for the Challenger stage as well for the last major. And it's very similar. It's a very similar region with the fact that I don't think that they're going to be necessarily accounted for all too much. They kind of went under the radar in this last RMR. I think that they've still got some stable pieces in A-Core. The calling of Shuhei is still one to be very, very feared. And I think that overall this Gamer Legion roster should still be able to do it in terms of stability. I like what they've shown. They've still shown that they've got stability. And I think they have potential to blow some teams out of the water. I forget what their first team they play is, but let me just get that up real quick. Yeah, they play Complexity, which is a very, very doable best of one to win and get off on the right foot. So I think that Gamer Legion could be that 3-0. Of course, this pick is always going to be risky. It's always going to be a bit of a joker pick. You could put Mouse here. I'm actually thinking about switching it. I might actually do that. But yeah, keep that option open. But as far as the O3s are concerned, who am I gonna put here? It's between Gamer Legion, Fluxo, and Mongols. I don't have Complexity going through or going O3 because this roster, you just never know. And I think there's just so much risk involved that the risk of them going through is possible, but I just don't think it's going to be. And I'd much rather be proven wrong than actually put them through. And so I'm wishing the best for the Complexity boys, but I think there's some huge risk involved with that roster. In terms of Greyhound, look, man, I saw what they did at Melbourne, and I'm still really, really skeptical to put them in as O3. I think this roster still has enough of gas in the tank to throw some teams off the rocker in the BO1s and maybe even in the BO3s. I mean, Alistair is still a stud. He's still able to put up some huge clutches for this roster. Inns has shown some really tough stuff. You know, when he was first on that Renegades roster, I wasn't all too impressed by him, even with the statistics that he was able to bring in. But now he's finally able to convert that internationally. So I think that he's got what it takes to win at least a map here or there to make it through. I think the Mongols have taken a dip in form, especially bringing in Azteca and losing score. It's a huge blow to their confidence and their performance, but I think they've still got enough of a style that they can replicate enough of a form to win a best of one and take an upset here or there. It's going to be difficult, but I think that Asian teams are always good for an upset here or there, and I think the Mongols have enough of a stable style to do it. They did it with IHC, and they've shown on the Mongols, even at Katowice, ruining some other teams' fairy tale runs to make it to that main event. So I think the Mongols should be able to make it through. I'm going to be putting Fluxo as my own 3, and I know a lot of people have been choosing this team as well. And I'm just going to talk about the road that they had to make it through from the Americas RMR. I don't think that it was a very legitimate one, and they struggled to even make it through that final BO3. I believe it was against Paqueta. I could be wrong. But that roster is not a good one. And I think that Fluxo's style is way too inconsistent at this level of the game. It's very feast or famine. And I think that a lot of these players are very individually skilled, don't get me wrong. But I feel like they're very discombobulated. I feel like some of the decisions that they've made throughout that RMR were very, very egregious. And they should have been eliminated numerous amounts of times. But they managed to scrape through the Americas region. And I don't think that the competition there was thick enough for them to be happy with the form that they're going in to the Paris Major. So I think I'm going to put them as the O3. I'd love to be proven wrong. I love the fire that this roster has, but I don't think they have what it takes to get a map off some of these rosters. And that's going to do it. That's going to be my pick'ems. I might update the 3-0, so stay tuned to my Twitter, twitter.com/thatpaladin. And I'll let you guys know if I do change that 3-0 pick. But I think I'm pretty set on the 7 teams advancing. I'm excited for this cycle, man. I mean, last major, there's so many teams, so many players that are vying to get that last trophy before we head into CS2. And, I'm just so looking forward to seeing the absolute bloodbath that we have in store. But for now, that's all it's going to be for now. I mean, I'm just going to keep uploading these pick'em videos, but we'll be back on that content grind quickly. I'll be doing watch parties with Thorin and Last Free Nation, so keep an eye on that. They'll be running watch parties every single day for every single match, so keep an eye out for that. Super excited to be a part of that. And yeah, if you've been here all the way to the end, I'm sure you've subscribed to the channel, but you haven't, leave a subscribe, and we'll see you very, very soon for the Legend stage. Peace.